now to The Voice, and the Parliamentary Committee examining the proposed voice to Parliament has concluded its hearings. The final one was held in Canberra yesterday, featuring contributions from Noel Pearson, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, and others, including lawyer and Jesuit priest Father Frank Brennan, who joins me now. Father Frank, thanks for your time as always.
Pleasure.
As you've raised with us and our viewers previously, your concern has been specifically around the wording of executive government and the voice being able to make representations to executive government, potentially clogging up the workings of the public service particularly. You expressed that again yesterday in your testimony. Do you think the committee will budge now?
I don't know. I presume there'll be a dissenting report at least, and I presume the dissenting report would take seriously these arguments. In terms of where the government is, I think that there's some acknowledgement that there are matters of doubt and uncertainty when you extend it to all of executive government. That is, Kieran, not only ministers of state, but of 250,000 public servants. And everyone's in furious agreement that Parliament will be able to ensure that the voice doesn't clog up the workings of government. The only question is, if you constitutionalise the access to 250,000 public servants, are you able, by Act of Parliament, to simply squash that out? And I'd have thought, in terms of getting to certainty, and as I've said, as a political point, trying to get a few Liberals aboard, why wouldn't you simply change executive government to ministers of state?
While the government might be open or aware of some of the uncertainty, Noel Pearson, the very influential leader and an architect really of The Voice, was asked about your proposed form of words, ministers, to replace executive government with ministers of state, thereby removing any reference or any possibility that public servants could get caught up in it. He doesn't appear open to shift.
Sure. And
which is a challenge for the government, isn't it?
It's a challenge for the government. And let's bear in mind, this is a legislative process now. This is the first time that it's gone beyond the referendum working group for consideration with their constitutional experts. And so anyone and everyone's been able to have their say, but now it's got to be debated in both houses of Parliament. And as you would know, in the Senate, things can often get hairy. So I would think there's got to be some pretty clear deliberation on asking what's actually gained by constitutionalising access to 250,000 public servants. Because in the end, what we're being told by everyone, including ex-Justices French and Hayne, is, oh no, you'd never do that because you'd clog up the system of government. And it's being said that under Clause 3 of the amendment, that Parliament would always be able to ensure that you don't clog it up. Well, if we're all agreed you don't clog it up, then simply change it to ministers of state. The other thing, you might remember the eminent constitutional lawyer Anne Toomey said that in terms of making representations, it's not that representations necessarily have to be made to the individual making decisions. Representations could just be made to the minister, or she even said to an email address or one particular officer. So nothing absolutely is to be lost by changing it to ministers of state. And what you get are two things. You get certainty that you haven't constitutionalised unwittingly access to 250,000 public servants. And the second thing you get is the prospect that some of the key Liberals, like Andrew Bragg, who's on this committee, and Julian Leeser, who appeared before the committee, if you could get them to agree to the formula of words, cutting it back to ministers of state, I would think that would set off something of a chain reaction within the Liberal Party room. At least I'm open to that possibility and hope it would happen.
Noel Pearson also referred to, well, he was asked specifically about you and your contribution to the debate and what you're articulating again today for us and our viewers. He says that he's known you for a long time and
he said 40 years.
Yeah, 40 years, and you were in the room when he spoke yesterday.
Yeah.
But he said he's taking your previous advice,
yes,
being hard-headed.
Sure.
This.
He was referring to what I'd said in 1991. And I'm still of that view. And I think it's wonderful that we have matured as a nation.
Because you told the Indigenous leadership they need to be hard-headed in
absolutely.
how they deal with government.
And all power to them. And in a hard-headed way, they've now come forward with a proposal. But I say, because this is the Constitution, it's not simply policy, it's not simply legislation. Because it's the Constitution that belongs to all of us, we've got to make sure that we get it right. And if we can get it more right with this slight change, while at the same time losing nothing, then I simply say, why not? But I equally concede, Kieran, it's not my call. I'm a white fella Catholic priest who's been around for 40 years in this field, but here is the Indigenous group who has sat down with government and said this is what they want. But the question for government is, how are we going to maximise the vote in this, not only hopefully to get us to 50% plus one, but to get the country to yes with a feeling that we've done the right thing?
Do you think the committee, well, initially it looked like they were going to make an error and not allow Tony Abbott to appear, which would have been odd, a former Prime Minister? They relented by the looks of it, found some time, he did appear, but is it healthy to have that sort of airing of all views, including those so strongly against the proposal like Mr Abbott?
I think it's very healthy, and it's one of the reasons why back on the 9th of November, your listeners will remember that I wrote a strong letter to the Prime Minister saying I thought it was the time then to set up a parliamentary process. I thought it was the time then to try and get some agreement about what the formula of words would be, because by delaying it, what we've done is set off a whole lot of antipathies, and the ad hominem arguments have been ludicrous. In fact, if I may say, I thought some of the questions I got from Senator White, the Labor senator, yesterday were just quite inappropriate. But that's the turf we're in. It's not as if I'm an enemy of state. It's not as if I'm a no campaigner. Sure, I'm here as a lawyer and as a citizen saying that there are things that need to be clarified, but let's have a civil conversation about that. And we as lawyers might disagree on things, but trying to get to yes, we need to be able to look at the complexities that arise with these sorts of questions.
And it does seem inappropriate for your motivation or strategy to be questioned, given your history in this space.
Well, it comes with the turf. And that's the problem with this sort of debate.
What is there an assumption that you just have to accept their approach and that's it? There's no deviance?
I don't know.
You're not allowed to deviate from that at all?
Well, I just continue to call for civil discourse, and I say, let's play the ball and not the man, to use the old-style term. And if we do that, we might more properly get to yes, and the country might feel good about itself. I mean, one of the problems with the present debate has been, with so much ad hominem behaviour going on, it's as if to impugn the motive of anyone who doesn't agree with these 79 words. Well, it's a very strange way to try and amend the Constitution. Constitutions are always amended by means of compromise. That's what the Founding Fathers were about. They spent 10 years in compromise. Why can't we do it when we've just got this simple issue which is before us?
You might have issues with those 79 words of the amendment, but what is your position when it comes to the final?
My position is that
final vote.
We're still in a legislative process, and I think what's important is to try and get the words right and contribute to that legislative process. Yes, I'm one of those Australians who will happily vote yes for an Indigenous voice, but I think it's important. I'm spending a lot of time getting around the country giving talks at the moment, and I find the audiences fall into three groups. There are those who vote yes no matter what's in there. There are those who vote no, like Tony Abbott. Wouldn't matter what words you changed or whatever. But in the middle are a group of Australians who are undecided. They want to know this really makes a difference, can help people on the ground, particularly in remote communities, and they want to know that it doesn't clog up the system of government. Now, that's the important part of the debate at the moment. Now, sure, I will be voting yes, but at the moment, I'm saying I'm one of those who'll be voting yes who wants to get the country to yes, and I think we can only do that if we get the wording more appropriate and if we get a few key Liberals on board. I readily concede. People say, oh, look, the days of bipartisanship are over. You don't need the Liberal and National parties on board. But I think we need a few key Liberals, and that's what we've got to work on.
Father Frank, it's always great to get your time and your insights. Thanks.